Happy Friday, everyone. On today's Locked On NHL, we take a very early look at what free agency could look like next summer.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Welcome to the Locked On NHL Friday show. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. You can find him on Twitter at IceWarsNYRBSNYI. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube. We're on the Sirius XM app. Basically, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get the latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. How's it going this Friday, Gil?
It's going. We're getting to that quiet part of the NHL summer, which is both good and bad. I'm going through a little hockey withdrawal, but Women's World Cup soccer will keep me a little bit occupied for the next few
I was
years.
going to say, yeah, that's kind of where my brain's at for the most part right now. A lot of fun soccer to be played. But in the world of hockey, we do have some news. The Seattle Kraken extended Dave Hackstol, head coach. His contract is now through the 25-26 season. And honestly, I think it's well earned. I know sometimes I have Flyers brain in terms of, my experience with him, but he's definitely a prime example of an NHL coach who maybe, wasn't so successful in his first time, as an NHL head coach, but learned a lot, became an assistant, got some more knowledge along the way, and then went back to a head coaching position and has found some success with the Kraken.
Yeah, he is now going to be the poster boy for recycled coaches, I think. But he did do, as you said, he learned from his first go around. Maybe he wasn't quite ready at that point. He climbed his way back up the ladder. And, taking over an expansion team is always a different kind of a challenge. And the fact that here in the second season, this team had as much success as it did, got to give him a lot of credit after a shaky first season. So I think it's well-deserved as well. And congratulations to Hackstol and to the Seattle Kraken for a great season last year.
Yeah, of course, he was a Jack Adams finalist this year as well, which was also well-deserved, I think. And I think it bodes well for some consistency in Seattle as they're continuing to take steps forward in, their growth and development. Love it for them. This week, we also had Connor Bedard sign his ELC, which was, I think, something that Blackhawks fans were very much looking forward to. And now that is underway. I also think it was very smart back at the draft. They had his jersey number ready for him. It wasn't like the draft year jersey number for everyone else. They got the marketing set. Now they have the ELC signed and they are ready to go.
And it was also smart that they waited till he actually turned 18 to sign the contract so that it was a legal document and he didn't have to have his parents sign in addition to him.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We also had two guys avoid arbitration over the summer. Gabe Vilardi signed back with the Jets, and Brett Howden signed with Vegas. Always good to see those resolved before it actually goes to arbitration.
Yeah, arbitration hearings can get messy. I mean, because you go into that room, you're arguing in front of the arbitrator, and the team representative is always going to say things to try to drive the salary down. And sometimes players take that stuff personally, and it can create some bad blood between the general manager and the player or the player's agent. So it's always better if you can work that out before you go into that room and have to say things you might later regret.
Yeah, absolutely. But back to our main topic of today's episode, which is a very early look at next year's free agency, which should be really fascinating because we're looking at a situation where the cap is most likely going to increase significantly. Obviously, this year it only went up by 1 million to 83.5, but it could go up by, maybe 10 million over the next few years, with a significant jump this upcoming off season. And so I think a lot of players who took short-term deals, thinking that they're going to wait to cash in until the bigger increase comes into play. Now it's like all coming to a head where there's a bunch of these guys all at once, right?
Yeah, and there's going to be a glut on the free agent market because so many eligible free agents this offseason took that 1-year bridge deal because they knew the cap was going to go up significantly more next summer and that teams just didn't have the money to spend this offseason. So now it's almost like it's not quite double the size, but it's a larger than normal size free agent class. And I sort of wonder a little bit, because of the size of the class, whether or not there will be some players who will try to sign during this season upcoming to try to get their money before the money starts to be used up.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a weird confluence of that and what the moves at the trade deadline look like. Because, if a guy gets traded at deadline to a team that doesn't necessarily have that cap space for the next couple of years or has already allocated that money, it could be just a rental situation, and then they're going to hit the open market in the off season. I think, it's going to be really hard to gauge what that off season is going to look like for the true free agent frenzy starting July 1st until we go through the trade deadline exercise and figure out where people are starting from, even for a potential negotiation.
Yeah, and then inevitably at the trade deadline, you're going to have those trade and sign situations where a player who's a potential free agent goes to a new team. They negotiate before the trade is made, a new contract extension. How is that going to fit in with the cap? How often are players going to do that? Are they going to be willing to give up potentially hitting the open market for the security of dollars in their pocket now? Always a lot of variables, but because of the way it's set up this year, I think we're going to see even more movement and more questions trying to figure out who. It's like musical chairs. Who's going to be left standing without a place to go, without money left in the cap?
Yeah, I think, obviously the biggest name on everybody's minds is Auston Matthews for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, right now he's making 11.64 million. And you have to think, well, that's a huge percentage of the Leafs cap to begin with. I think it's around 13% of their cap. So, can it go up from there? Should it go up from there based on his results? I know that Nathan McKinnon 12.6 million figure is out there, and who is going to be the highest paid player in the NHL. And you have to wonder whether, the Leafs with new management, with Brad Treliving in charge, is he going to play hardball with Auston Matthews? Is Auston Matthews going to play hardball with the Leafs? Because obviously, he is the franchise player there, despite having that strong core. So I think, what ends up happening with the Auston Matthews contract is going to kind of set the tone for free agency overall.
Yeah, no question. I mean, he is the crown jewel of potential available free agents, although there are a lot of other very interesting players out there. But, it's not every day that you have a player like Auston Matthews. And then if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, do you want to keep the big four together, and can you keep the big four together? The answer to those two questions may not be the same.
Yeah, it's going to be a real delicate balancing act for Leafs management, because not only do you have Auston Matthews as a free agent, but William Nylander is going to be a free agent. He may be somebody that falls by the wayside in all of this, because you also have Tyler Bertuzzi, who will be a free agent, again, signed, a deal with the Leafs. Max Domi is on that list. And then on the defensive side, they just signed John Klingberg to a 1-year deal there as well. And, he could be wanting part of that money as well. I think how the Leafs perform this season, obviously with the way things went in the playoffs this past season, there's a lot of disappointment, but there's a lot of hunger moving forward to try and get it done. And there's obviously some upheaval on the management side as a result. And so, there could be this weird like balancing act of, do we wait to see how the Leafs perform this season to determine who stays and who goes, but then will the cap money be gone, or like how are they going to figure all that out before people walk and sign elsewhere because they
Yeah.
have to wait, right?
Well, I mean, look, if in the unlikely event that they bomb this season or injuries hit and they're just not contending for whatever reason, that they do have an opportunity at the trade deadline to try to move some of these guys if that's the course they want to take. And if they want to try to keep that big four together, can they afford to fill out the rest of the roster with quality enough players to win? So
I know.
it's a like a tightrope walk act for management in Toronto. No easy answers. And I think, like you said, a lot of it will depend on how Toronto is doing this season. Come, February and March, when we get closer to the trade deadline, we're going to know a lot more about what the management is thinking in Toronto.
Yeah, well, there are other players in free agency besides Toronto Maple Leafs, and we will start with some goaltenders on the free agency list for next summer coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. And no matter what major league team you root for, you'll find some great betting odds and different propositions, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Getting back into our early look at 2024 NHL free agency. Once again, the goaltending situation in free agency. The list is thin, Gil, but it starts with Connor Hellebuyck. And I think Connor Hellebuyck is obviously in the driver's seat in all of this because he has kind of just been that Winnipeg Jet who has been literally in the firing line for that team, faced a ton of shots. There hasn't been a strong defensive structure in front of him, to prevent that. And they haven't found success. And so the question I think comes up, is he going to just want to leave when his contract is over? And will he be like a huge piece available at trade deadline? And how is that going to affect his next contract?
Yeah, I think that, the first question is, do the Jets want to try to keep him? And the second one would be, can they afford to try to keep him? Are they willing to spend the amount of money it would take to keep Hellebuyck in Winnipeg? And, the thing is this, is he going to want to stay if they do want to keep him? Because, as you said, he's been facing a lot of pucks. Without Hellebuyck right now, I don't even want to think where Winnipeg would be in the standings.
Yeah.
So, this is like a crossroads. If they trade Connor Hellebuyck, it's rebuild city big time for the Winnipeg Jets. It may be anyway, but
right.
Certainly if they don't keep him. And I guess the other question is, if they look to trade him, can they possibly get value for him?
Well, you would hope so, based on the caliber of goaltender that he is. But the desperation factor may be there, in terms of being in a difficult situation. But I would expect, the Jets to be able to get significant return Hellebuyck's current cap hit is 6.2-ish million, and you have to think that he would get at least that in a next contract, right?
At least I would think if I'm him, I'm asking for 9 and settling for 8, but whether or not he can get it is a different question.
Yeah, he is 31 right now, so 30. He'll be 32. Goaltenders obviously play a little bit later. Thinking maybe a 3-year deal, 3 to 4 year deal for him the next go around, and he could be a game changer for another team. But besides that, the list is pretty thin. I do have to mention Carter Hart as the Flyers host. This is a very difficult situation for the Flyers right now. We are waiting any day now. We talked about this on last week's Friday show about the Hockey Canada report that has not yet, as of recording, been released. Could be today, could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months from now. Who knows? But he was part of that Canadian World Junior team. And so obviously, I think things are on hold with any potential extension with the Flyers until that plays out. Making the assumption that he's not suspended or there's no factor related to that Hockey Canada report, I think they're going to do a good faith negotiation to try and extend him over the next season and have it done before the end of next season. But anything can happen again with this cap situation. And does Carter Hart, really want to be part of this rebuild in Philadelphia? I think it's pretty exciting and it's off to a good start, but he's had a rough go of it the last couple of years in terms of the Flyers team in front of him. And does he want to do that for another couple of years to get to a promised land that may or may not be there?
Yeah, that's always a question. And you also have to think that Carter Hart is 26 right now, 27.
25, actually.
25. So he'll be 26 next year.
Yeah.
This is a big chance.
Yep.
This is the 6, 7, 8 year maximum amount of money deal opportunity, and he's not going to get another one most likely. So,
no.
If you're Carter Hart, this is when you want to figure out what the rest of your prime career looks like. How deeply embedded is he in the Philadelphia organization and community at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's well loved in the community and in the fan base in terms of everybody understands that he's been dealing with a difficult situation in terms of the team itself and the performance out there. Nobody blames him for the Flyers being bad. So I think, he's in a good spot as far as that goes. Again, it's just a matter of what does he want to do. And I think, again, all the other stuff aside, I think he just has to figure that out for himself and then go from there in terms of potential negotiations. But, as other than that, Matt Murray will be a free agent then. That's part of the Toronto situation.
Yeah.
But again, is he a franchise goaltender to take them to a Stanley Cup? I don't know. And other than that, not much else out there in the goaltending.
No. And then, to complicate it with Toronto, will there be any money left by the time they get around to figuring out what to do with him?
Yeah, but, they're going to need a goalie. That's for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah, I do not envy them up in Toronto trying to figure all this out. And so we've just really talked about the Leafs and goalies, and there's a huge list of other free agents available out there. And I think, looking at a couple teams and what they are going to have to deal with in that offseason, I think one of the most interesting ones will be in Vegas. Now, they'll be the defending Stanley Cup champions this season. But we know Vegas has a history of discarding anybody in order to get to that next step. And, in the off season next year, we've got Jonathan Marchessault and Chandler Stevenson, who will be free agents at the same time. And, my gut says that they're going to end up jettisoning Marchessault because he's 3 years older.
Yes.
And obviously it's going to depend on how Chandler Stevenson plays this season, right? But I think that, that will be a really interesting storyline for this season going into next summer.
It will be. And Vegas, since they've gotten into the league, they've been in win now mode. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. I agree with you. If they're going to sign one, they go with the younger player. That makes more sense. But again, performance on the ice is going to be a factor in determining that as well.
Yeah. And looking at the Carolina Hurricanes, they're going to have a couple of key guys up for free agency. Sebastian Aho and Teravainen are on that list. And, again, depending on how Carolina does, they've just never been able to crack that, Stanley Cup level play. And I think that obviously, I think with them, it's more of a wait and see situation to see how the team does. And if they're going to have to make some more changes next offseason, if they don't get it done.
Yeah, Sebastian Aho is such a big part of their offense, and their offense does tend to struggle a little bit. So it'll be interesting. And then you have to add defenseman Brett Pesce and see, what they do with him. He's 29, so you don't want to give him a 7-year, 8-year contract at this point, but he is, they one of the secrets to their success is their deep and mobile blue line. Again, can you keep them all? Interesting questions coming up and some tough decisions in Carolina.
Yeah, well, there's some other interesting individual players on the list, and we will get to them coming up next. Gil, we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation about, a couple of guys signing 1-year deals for this season in order to maybe capitalize on some more money being available to negotiate with next summer. And I think, one of those key free agents is going to be Jason Zucker, who signed that 1-year deal in Arizona. Could be a huge contender for a trade deadline deal. And then depending on how that goes, could be in the free agent market. I think very likely could be in the free agent market.
Yeah, I would think that is a real possibility. And again, it'll be interesting to see what approach players and their agents take. Because at the trade deadline, they probably won't know yet exactly how much the cap is going up next offseason.
Yeah. You have to think that is going to be a factor as well. Tyler Toffoli signing with the New Jersey Devils again. The Devils have been taking huge steps forward. Is he going to want to stick around? But if so, is he going to want more money
right?
When the cap goes up? And how does that fit into the Devils' plan?
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. And obviously, seeing how he does this year with the Devils will be part of it. I think Toffoli was a great pickup. If I'm the Devils, I probably want to keep him around to surround that young up-and-coming team with a little veteran talent. But seeing how well he fits in and how the Devils do as a team, going to be big factors in determining how much, if any, money they're going to offer Toffoli to stay.
Yeah, and then a couple of mainstays, veteran guys on their respective teams hitting free agency in Steven Stamkos for the Bolts and Tom Wilson for the Caps.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard for me to imagine Steven Stamkos in another team's uniform just based on what he's done over his career, what he's meant to the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's also 33 years old now, so he's going to start his decline, at least statistically. That's what we should expect. What would be the market for Stamkos? He'll certainly sell tickets. He'll certainly be able to help a team, but for how long and what is he worth at this point in time if he hits the market?
Yeah, I think he stays in Tampa, and I think he takes a pay cut to make it happen.
I agree.
And I see him signing, and they're going to give him a very friendly deal in order to do that. So they'll probably give him term in order to take that pay cut just to make sure he gets the money over time. So I could see him signing a 4-year deal, with a significant pay cut in order to do it. For Wilson, there was scuttlebutt that maybe he was going to be on the trade market this past year. That was quashed and it didn't happen. But, he's only 30, so he'll be 31 next off season. There's some years left in him. And with Washington kind of going through it's not a rebuild, because I think they're actually doing a really good job of keeping the youth and their prospects developing very well there. So I don't think they're ever going to get that low as far as, hitting rock bottom per se. So there's a really strong future ahead for the Caps, with the draft they had this past year. He may want to stick around for that.
He may. And I think Alex Ovechkin may want him to stick around as well. So that always has to be taken into consideration in Washington. What does Ovi have? 3 years left on his deal. So, signing Watson to a 3-year extension might be the sweet spot if that's what Wilson is willing to do.
Yeah. Anybody else standing out to you on this big free agent list?
Oh boy, there were so many names, and the other thing is obviously we don't know who, if anyone, will sign during the offseason. Look, how about Noah Hannafin, the defenseman in Calgary? I think that's a name that should be certainly mentioned. Jake Gunsel of Pittsburgh out there, and Mark Scheifele. There are some really good names out there who may not make as many headlines, obviously, as an Auston Matthews or a Connor Hellebuyck or a Sebastian Aho, but who can really help a team improve in the right situation.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see if there's any correlation between what Connor Hellebuyck decides to do and Mark Scheifele is going to do in Winnipeg, as far as a potential rebuild there. Is that going to be the end of it there for both of them this off season? And yeah, I think that there's a lot of moving pieces and parts. Like we said, we're going to have to see how each of these teams' seasons go, what happens at trade deadline, and then go from there. And obviously, what is the cap actually going to be? But I think it's a real fun exercise to think who could be in new places as of not this upcoming season, but the following season.
It should be a very interesting situation. And then, of course, the monkey wrench in all these things can be injuries, because one of these players can get injured and all of a sudden everything changes depending on how long the rehab is and what their health is going to be. So yeah, it'll be a very interesting 12 months between now and next year's free agency.
Yeah, we are excited to talk about all of it as it happens. That will do it for today's show. Gil, you'll be back on Monday to talk with some of our hosts from around the Locked On NHL family about what's going on with their teams this off season. And in the meantime, everybody have a great weekend.